Melbourne is definitely the talk of the town at the moment. I'm seeing so many of my clients buy there in quick succession. Number of people starting to rationalise and understand that land tax in Victoria is a cost of investing there. They're seeing the value and the opportunity of the low entry point, especially in some of the major metropolitan areas of Melbourne as well, holding a huge demographic of people from all walks of life, from all countries of the world, and from all socioeconomic statuses. So it's definitely becoming a melting pot of culture again. It's seen definitely the largest share of interstate migration, with more and more people coming back to Victoria, driven by some lower rents compared to other places of the country, and also at the same time a little bit of a beating heart back into the property economy that's there. Many people on the ground, and I know many buyers agents who are lucky enough I get to call them clients and get to call them friends as well. I know they're spending a lot of time in the auction markets there, seeing 50, 60 people turn up to auctions. They're also seeing 50, 60 people turn up to open homes, obviously for the right property, of course, but there's definitely a lot more heat coming back to the market, a lot more first-home buyers wanting to buy there, and a lot more property investors looking for that value. You are not going to get the top-level rents. Average yields there might hover between 3 and 4%, but for me, it's always been a state based on capital growth, not necessarily the high level of income or cash flow. There's other states that are good for that. I want to share with you many things about Victoria from an investor who's invested there over a number of years, but more importantly about a couple of the LGAs that I'm seeing many clients buying, and myself, I've been looking at investing myself. I'm Jeremy Iannuzzelli. Welcome to What Schools Should Have Taught You, a podcast where I share with you all the things you need to know about true financial freedom and building wealth.
Everything schools should have taught you in one place. With a property portfolio of over 17 million and an accountancy firm of over 16,000 clients, as well as being an accountant to some of the wealthiest people in Australia, Jeremy Iannuzzelli will be sharing his lessons on everything schools should have taught you, so you can build the life you want.
I want to share with you the 3 top areas that I'm seeing a lot of people buying. Now, again, my role as an accountant, I'm not here necessarily to say these are the areas to buy. Strongly advised to use the services of a buyer's advocate, do your own research, get yourself onto a plane if you're from interstate, or get your boots on the ground and start looking for properties yourself. But some fun facts, there's 79 LGAs in Australia, of which Brisbane City LGA is the largest, holding about 1.2 million residents. But I'm going to be sharing with you today about 3 specific LGAs in Victoria where I'm seeing more buyer activity. Now, you've heard me on my channel in the past, and you've maybe heard me on a number of other podcasts talk about Victoria starting to heat up. It was an area where 2 years ago, I rarely saw anyone buy there. In fact, I'd probably say months and months would go by before I'd even see a person purchase in Victoria. The last probably 6 to 12 months, I've seen a lot more activity, to the point now where in my very active client base, I'm seeing probably anywhere between 4 to 5 properties a week being purchased in Victoria, and a lot more buyers agents buy on the back of that demand. The cash flow is not necessarily the strongest, but potentially a lot more capital growth may come due to its subdued prices over the last 4 years. Because we all know that during COVID, a large portion of the country went through astronomical amounts of growth. It wasn't uncommon to see 25 and 30% returns per annum, and that wasn't just for 1 year, but for numerous years. While Victoria lagged so far behind with roughly anywhere between 1 to 4% growth, some areas going backwards and some areas staying quite stagnant. But the 3 LGAs that I'm seeing clients purchasing at the moment, number 1, starting with Whittlesea. Whittlesea is an LGA north of Melbourne CBD, and it captures some areas like Thomastown and Layla. These are areas which predominantly there's been a lot of migration back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. A lot of Europeans settled there, built their homes. My background is Italian, and I do have a number of Italians that I know that have settled in that area and have grandparents still living there in their old red brick homes on 600 square metres with a huge amount of concrete in the backyard. There's a number of these houses that have been built by the owners themselves, and they've been rarely traded. They've held these properties for a number of years, but that generation is getting old, are passing away, and the children are selling up. We're starting to see a very different generation buying there, a lot more first home buyers wanting to buy that suburban lifestyle, looking for those larger blocks. So without a doubt, seeing more and more clients buying the Whittlesea area, the Whittlesea LGA. It's seen a bit of a price movement compared to where it was, say, 12 to 18 months ago, and predominantly a lot more owner-occupiers are buying there, say, than investors. And as investors, we know that owner-occupiers tend to pay a little bit more money because there's that emotional intrinsic value attached to their offer. Another LGA that we've started to see pop, and this is not old, it's Typically when Melbourne's doing quite well, a lot of investors will gravitate to this area because of its lower price point and a little bit stronger than normal yields, but that's the Frankston LGA. The Frankston LGA sits on the south-eastern side of that peninsula. It's generally considered a lower socioeconomic area, although as of late the incomes are all increasing across Australia, so it is starting to buck that bit of a trend. But the Frankston LGA has always been very popular with investors and very popular with buyers agents. So that's an area which we're starting to see, well, I'm starting to see a lot more buyers activity, a lot more buyers agent buying there for my clients and investors. The average price point is probably sitting in those late 5s and mid 6s, with rents probably hovering anywhere between late 4s to maybe even late 5s, depending on the property. The Frankston LGA itself, a lot more people are starting to look at opportunities there to put granny flats on to assist with the cash flow, because there's been some recent changes across all the LGAs in Victoria, making it a lot more easier for people to build granny flats in their backyard. Or otherwise known, if you're in Victoria or talking about granny flats, it's otherwise known as an SSD, which is a small secondary dwelling. I don't know why they gave it such a technical name. A granny flat sounds so much better, but the talk of the town in Victoria post a lot of that legislation change is these SSDs, these small secondary dwellings, which again, it's there to assist in the housing crisis that we all know about across Australia, and Victoria itself giving people an opportunity to build a secondary dwelling, and that gives the opportunity of increasing the rent for a lot of these areas which potentially have lower than normal rental yields. Now, another one, you won't normally hear this LGA being thrown out there. You'll more hear about the specific suburbs in this LGA, but the Grampians Central Highland region. Now, if you haven't heard of the Grampians Central Highland region, it's actually a lot of the region surrounding Ballarat. Now, Ballarat would be considered one of the regional areas in Victoria. Most people know Ballarat for the mining. It's a great, I remember going there as a young kid and going to some of the theme parks that used to be there, or the historical theme parks, especially the old Ballarat mining town, and you got to do some panning for gold. But the Grampian Central Highland is such a large place covering such a huge amount of square kilometres that the surrounding areas and Ballarat itself are starting to see more and more people buy there. Again, it went for a bit of a slower downturn as interest rates started to increase and the yields just didn't catch up. So it has been a little bit of a suppressed market for some time, but more and more people are buying there, and more people are buying there with the opportunity of being able to subdivide. So a lot of my clients have been buying there, buying a property on a large block of land. They're going to be subdividing that block, building a property at the back, and maybe selling one or both. But I am starting to see a lot more market movement in that specific location of the Grampian Central Highlands region, more commonly around Ballarat itself. So they're the 3 LGAs where I'm, as an accountant, seeing my clients start to invest. A number of buyers agents are all buying in those areas as well because they're seeing some opportunity. There are a number of other LGAs which are going through their heyday in Victoria, so I'd be saying research all those particular LGAs as much as you can. Speak to your property professional, your financial planner, speak to your friends, speak to your property valuers, get an understanding of what's happening in the market there. Nothing's going to beat boots on the ground. I strongly advise that if you are going to be looking at buying in Victoria, streets do matter with inside LGAs, so it's worthwhile hiring a car, spending a couple of days, knowing the particular street you want to buy in if you're doing it yourself, or even if you're not and using the services of a buyer's advocate or agent. It's always worthwhile to do your own due diligence, and you might want to suggest a bit of a plan for that buyer's advocate or agent to say, this is the particular area that I'm wanting to buy. They're the couple of streets that I love to buy a property, and that's my business plan or strategy for my Melbourne purchase. Because to buy there without a business plan sometimes could spell disaster. Understand and know what your budget is, so you get a feeling of how much rent you probably need to suffice and make sure that you can pay all the costs, because the rental yields specifically aren't there all the time. But with those SSDs, those smaller secondary dwellings, it's going to give you an opportunity to be able to hold these properties longer term through any cycle, and that's going to sustain and hopefully give you a lot more return in the future. If you're loving this content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're listening to us on YouTube, or follow us on Spotify. I'm Jeremy Iannuzzelli, and that's what school should have taught you.